focus is really research and science of trees and green infrastructure and forests in urban areas. And our area of interest is the Delaware River watershed, all the urban areas within that watershed. So that's really why I'm talking about science today. And so when I did my abstract, I thought, oh, this would be such a great idea. There's all this wonderful Forest Service science out there. I want to share it with people and then see if I can give them some ideas for how to really use it. And then when I was putting the presentation together, I realized there's actually so much stuff that I could be showing you today that in a half an hour was kind of unrealistic. So I thought maybe it would make more sense to actually talk about how to access some of that science so that no matter what your questions are, you can find answers. And you can find me if you want more answers. And I may or may not be able to help you, but I'll try. And I'm going to use the smartboard for the first time. I think it's pretty awesome, so I'll try to put it to good use. So basically, I want to focus on a few things. Why should we care about being informed by science being a big thing? Most of you are here, so you probably already care a little bit at least about science. How can we access research? And then basically, what are some examples of things that are out there and easy ways to get to them? So first, why do we even care about being informed by science? And I would say that science can give us a good roadmap to getting to other places. We can learn from what other people have done. We can adjust our own decisions, particularly if we're doing some kind of land management or tree planting. If we know what works, what doesn't work, we can adjust according to that, and means that we're not all experimenting every time we do something. So I'm going to give one example of why it might be useful to use science when you're making decisions. And this is your honeysuckle and nest predation. So if you know what I'm going to say, just don't say anything and hold on. So if you were to go outside, you might observe this plant, your honeysuckle. This is some sort of shrub honeysuckle, may not actually be a myrrh, but you might also see some robins hanging out on that honeysuckle. And you might see these awesome, beautiful, delicious looking berries on the honeysuckle. And you may even see the robins eating those berries. And then you might say, well, I don't know, what might you say?
That's good.
Yeah, good, awesome. So honeysuckle, you might draw a conclusion. Honeysuckle is great for robins. And then you see robins nesting on honeysuckle, and you're like, yes, we have a breeding population here. It likes honeysuckle. It's getting food. It's getting a nesting location. That's all we need to know. Why don't we plant more? No, don't do that yet. But if you go to some research, and there isn't a ton of research on this, but this is a good example just to get kind of started with this idea. Researcher went out, started looking at actual nests and where they were happening, but then also looked at what was happening at those nest sites. And what they started finding was that robins were dying. And that's what you're seeing on this Lonicera shrub honeysuckle. They were dying you look at that, that's a lot higher than some of these native plants. Now it's a little suspicious here, they say native tree. They've obviously lumped all the native trees together or something, but still you're seeing a trend. It's enough to say, maybe I should look into this more. Maybe there's something going on. My observations may not be leading me to the right conclusions. And that's really what I want to get at today, is that research that's already out there can help us figure out if what we're observing makes sense, if we draw conclusions that are correct from the things that we observe, and can we make management decisions based on that. So you might look at this and say, all right, I need to know more information about whether honeysuckle is actually good for birds or not. Perhaps what's happening, and this is some of the things that have come out since then, maybe squirrels, because honeysuckle has these firm branches, maybe the squirrels are just walking up. Because there's so much honeysuckle, maybe the nests are ending up on these because they don't have any other options. The squirrels walk right up the branch, eat all the eggs. So sure, the robins are getting good nesting, they're getting nesting locations, but they're not getting any young. And in the world of birds, it's the young we care about as much as anything else. Okay, so one of the things you might think is, well, if you know, maybe now you've decided honeysuckle might not be good for your bird populations, well, you might be able to prioritize that over some other invasive shrub that may not, the research at least, and your observations may not make it seem like such a high priority. But where we're left with in a lot of cases is we have observation, like the honeysuckles being a nesting site for robins. And we start getting a question, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I don't know. But how do we get to an answer? Sometimes that can be a little tricky, particularly if you're not associated with the university. And then you can decide what you want to do about it. So I thought first I would go through a few things that are out there that maybe some people don't know exactly how accessible some things are and how great these resources, which are relatively new, are. So this is Google Scholar. Show of hands, how many people have heard of Google Scholar? Okay, not even half the room. It's really great because it accesses actual peer-reviewed journals. And I think what I looked up was impact of trees on water quality. So I think I can get to that. Let's see. Oh, it's amazing. So then you have these options of things. Oops, I hope I didn't touch anything. You have some options here. You can look up, this one sounds interesting, impact of nitrogen management practice on nutritional status and yield of Valencia orange trees and groundwater nitrate. And you're like, oh, well, it sounds interesting, but I don't care about oranges. The impact of land use change on water quality at the catchment scale, the use of export coefficients and structural model. In the Journal of Hydrology, sounds pretty good to me. Oh, yep, so there you are. Oops, sorry. I'm still learning. So now you have a abstract. Let's see what happens. And we get this disappointing realization that we have to pay $39.95 to get access to it. All right, but that's okay because we now know this is out there, and if we wanted to, we could track down this guy or this person, these men or women, whoever they are, and find out some more information. And we also, yes, we could also then scroll down further and see if we could find something that's publicly available. So then the Forest Service, not to tout my own agency, but we have this really neat search called Tree Search, and everything on here is accessible. You don't have to pay $39.95 to get it. You already paid that. So you can, let's see if it works. Somebody have a question, something they're interested in, anything tree or forest related? Did I spell wrong?
Just put dash for.
Okay, great. So now we could, I even know Kathleen Knight, she's great. And this is what she does all the time, is study ash trees that are infested with emerald ash borer. So you can access the, oops, I did it again. Little Britney Spears comment there. Then you can just click on view and print this publication. And unlike before, we're not going to get you should have paid for this subscription. You'll just get the actual paper. And then you can go through that paper and find out everything you want to know. If that didn't answer it, you can go back to here and look again. And now you know about Kathleen Knight and that she does emerald ash stuff, so you could just start looking up Kathleen Knight and find all of her publications. You go to her page, find out who she cites, and then find their papers on their websites and go on like that. Okay, so let's say you're interested in maybe broader tree-related issues, particularly ones related to health. EPA just created, and this is a pretty phenomenal idea. It's really brand new, so it's not full yet, but Eco Health Relationship Browser. And this doesn't work quite so well, but oh, it did work. Okay. So if you were to say, what should we follow? Anybody? How about engagement with nature? We can find out that, and then we say engagement in nature and aggression. You get a little summary. They say those individuals who had higher levels of nearby nature reported fewer acts of aggression and violence against others. And go on, you can find out who that person is that they got that information from, and then you can start following that train back again, as we've been discussing. So that's EPA, and so basically, as you can see, a lot of these federal agencies are trying to find ways to communicate the things that they're doing, the things that they're finding to the public. In the case of this understanding that, particularly when we talk about urban ecosystems, there's so many things that intersect, and people who study one piece of this don't necessarily know about the other piece of it, but they then, as they dig into urban ecosystems, find that there are these connections. And the more, I think it was even on NPR this morning, somebody made a quote, on NPR, this scientist was being interviewed about viruses. I don't know if anybody heard that, and he said something like, in my opinion, science is best when it is free-flowing and everybody has access basically to everybody else's information, because then you might observe one thing, you tell somebody else, that person has a little aha moment, and they're creating a new experiment that's leading to all kinds of discoveries. And that's kind of the idea about all this exchange of information. So the Forest Service and some other people have created some tools to make it a little easier to access science. Let's say you don't want to look for the journal article, you just want to kind of use some pieces of that research. So Forest Service has something called ITree Eco. A lot of you have probably heard of it. Nice thing about ITree Eco is that anybody can use it, though it's a little difficult to use if you don't have some experience with trees and if you're intimidated by Excel spreadsheets. But if that's the case, I have a card right here, and I can direct you to somebody in my office who can help you figure all that out. But what you get from ITree Eco is, the way it works is you go out and you do these plots, you figure out what the tree species are, what the size of those trees are, you plug it into this giant model, and out spits ecosystem benefits, such as the cost or the benefit financially to stormwater management by having these trees, the percent canopy, the number of trees, the types of common species, and then all of this comes back to some kind of valuation where you can actually say, our urban forest is worth gazillion $million, and then you can say that to your council person, we should be preserving or protecting or planting more trees because it's worth this much money. Or if what you're more interested in knowing is, are we leading to a sustainable forest? Do we have a tree species makeup that will lead us to a forest that does well? If you find out your most common species are black cherry, crabapple, ailanthus, and red maple, at least 2 of those 4 will send up little red flags to you that, well, ailanthus may not be something that you want to encourage in your sustainable forest, and red maple, if you have a really high percentage of red maple, then you'll be worried about Asian longhorn beetle in your forest. So it can give you that kind of information too. And same thing with ITree Design. If you're only interested in your property, you can look it up, enter in the kind of tree that you have, the circumference, what condition it's in, a few other things, and it will tell you what the value of your tree is. And then you can kind of play around with your property and say, oh, if I put a tree here, what would the value be, that sort of thing. And that's a lot easier to use. It's just a web app. And then we have something called Urban Tree Canopy Assessment. It's another kind of Forest Service product that we do with the University of Vermont. And UTC, Urban Tree Canopy Assessment, is basically a LiDAR product. LiDAR is lasers flown from an airplane, flies down, throws these lasers down, the airplane figures out how long it takes for the laser to get back to the plane. You get a 3-dimensional image of your forest, which can then be turned into a 2-dimensional image like this one, and eventually into another 2-dimensional image that can be used in GIS. And typically land cover information, they try very hard to get rid of all the canopy so they have nice clear view of all the buildings. But in this case, they make a model that actually allows you to identify all these trees as trees and not as clutter, basically, which is awesome because if you live in a community with a tree canopy goal, then you know exactly what your tree canopy is. If you're interested in, say, equity and you care where that tree canopy is, you can identify those spots that don't have any tree canopy. And if you want to prioritize your plantings, you can use it for that too. And so I thought that would be another opportunity using something called Open Data Philly, which is a free format that is in Philadelphia. You can search for whatever kind of information you want. In this case, if you wanted that data that came from the Forest Service initially, you just click on there. Let's see if it works again. And hit land cover. Oops, thank you. Click on that, view details, and you can download that data. If you have GIS, you can plug it right into GIS. You can do your own analysis on whatever you want, which if you are a data geek like I am, then that is so much fun. So if you are a citizen or you like citizens or residents of any sort, there's a lot of information out there. Well, there's a lot of opportunity for citizens to be more engaged in science, actual collection of good data. And a few of them, just giving you an example from Philadelphia, and this is actually for the 13-county area around Philadelphia. So if you're in Philadelphia, Chester, Bucks, Montgomery, Delaware counties, you can access Philly tree map. And what it does is this yearly eco impact, it's based on ITree streets. So Forest Service, again, it's all science-based. You can get total benefits for the area that you're looking at. Greenhouse gas benefits, water benefits, energy benefits, which is a good way to just communicate to people the value of trees. But you can also use it as a way of inventorying your trees too in your community. So if you want a free way to do an inventory, it's pretty good. It has a web app, a mobile app, so you can go around your own neighborhood, identify the trees, put them right on a map, and then over time be able to see where all your trees are yourself. Anybody have any questions so far? Okay. And then another example, I think citizen science is so amazing because there are so many, I mean, everybody can do science, and we need more eyes on these things. So this is one thing called Zombie Watch. I don't know that much about it, but I think it's a pretty neat idea. It's basically a way of figuring out where this particular disease is, this parasite. These bees become zombie-like, and a zombie fly becomes zombie-like, and so you can apparently easily identify these. Anybody can easily identify them, and then you can report them, and that way that goes right back to a scientist who can look at it even more, and you're part of the process of figuring out how this is moving around the country. And another one, which is probably the best one that I know of, is EBird. It's amazing, and researchers from all over the country use EBird and access data that anybody can contribute to. EBird is, you can basically, backyard birds, whatever you do, you just upload whatever birds you saw into EBird, and then somebody can download that. And then you can also do all kinds of cool things in terms of looking at how birds migrate and how people observe changes in migration. Okay, and then the other thing I wanted to mention is that if you need access to data or to people, answers to questions, I think, well, you can always call me, and I'll try to help. And local universities and graduate students are really amazing resources that are often not utilized. Municipal agencies too often don't have enough resources to be actively engaging in outreach, but often have some answers for you in terms of things that are happening or things they're observing, tree species, things that work, things that don't. DCNR also has foresters who do this kind of thing, and Penn State Extension. So I was actually hoping I could take this opportunity to, how much time do I have? Okay, that's pretty good. To ask you what you think the gaps are in research and where questions are and what questions you have that you wish somebody would answer. And I will write that down and maybe tell you if I can find it. Or if you have any questions.
In those various census of the trees, there's nothing that records how old a tree is.
No, it's really size. So, I mean, you can
Okay.
you can correlate
Make some
some things with
correlation.
size, yeah.
Because a property could be more valuable if it has a lot of older trees.
Oh,
than
yeah.
Just a canopy of
Yeah.
younger trees.
Yeah, I mean, well, the ITree works pretty well for getting a sense for how large trees are, if you have big, large, possibly old trees. So some of the things I put up there are ecological restoration, green infrastructures through trees, people and trees and health, and ecosystem services. And I hear sometimes things like, what are the connections between, or can we prove that in some way that trees make people happy, or that trees reduce air pollution, or that if you amend the soil, a street tree will do better, that sort of thing. So if you have any of those questions, I'd be happy to try to find answers. And yes, Jim?
Do you have a database of where ecological restoration is taking place in the Philadelphia region?
Huh, no, but that's a good idea.
You'd think somebody like the Mid-Atlantic chapter of the Society for Ecological Restoration would have something like that, but
I don't think so. Is anybody from the partnership in Delaware Estuary in here? But they have a project registry. I think in the past it's been more focused on sort of stream and water quality projects, but I don't think it's limited to that. I think that's just what people have been putting in there. And that would be, I mean, I wonder if they'd be interested in expanding that to include ecological restorations on sort of a larger scale. Yes.
I entered late, so I apologize if you covered this at the beginning, but I think one of the questions we're hearing, especially in the gas development areas, is what's the long-term cost to us of the forest fragmentation that's happening, and especially with the volume of pipelines, gathering lines. We're talking about loss of many forested watersheds, and because I work with a lot of small rural public water systems that are dependent on those forests as passive treatment facilities, basically, for drinking water. What's going to be the cost of now introducing more robust water treatment, because we've lost a lot of the ecosystem services?
There are some scientists at the Forest Service who are based out of the northeastern part of Pennsylvania who do talk about that. I mean, they do work on that.
Martina?
I don't know Martina, but Susan Stout's group, maybe
Okay.
Susan Stout's group. Yes.
Do you happen to know if there's one of these really cool tools that can guide someone who's a bit of a novice in making decisions about where to plant, what plants to plant in certain areas?
What plants to plant?
Like if you have a wet part of your property versus a shaded part versus a sunny part.
No, I don't think there is. I mean, unless, has anybody heard of one? Because that what to plant, where to plant, there are definitely, I mean, the same people that create Philly Tree Map are creating something that's kind of like where to plant, and Davey Institute created something for Casey Trees in DC that sort of tells you where to plant in terms of maximizing energy efficiency, but not what species are good for what site. Yes.
There are so many native plants that I would not plant anymore. Hemlock, sugar maple, ash. But is anybody looking at likely survivability of native trees moving ahead as insect pests and climate change get worse?
Well, individually, I think yes. And in, for instance, with elms, we have a program out of Delaware, Ohio, where they're trying to grow Dutch elm disease resistant or resistant enough for survival tree elms. But right now they're growing in a nursery, sort of a nursery environment, and the next step is, well, how much can they tolerate? You know, we've been able to get them to live here. Can we take them to, say, an urban area, put them in a street tree or in someone's yard? Will they still survive without getting Dutch elm disease? So that's kind of the next step, and hoping to bring that work to Philadelphia so that we can put elm trees all over and then study their survival and see, you know, if they can make it. So yes, but I'm probably not far enough along to answer the questions that you're looking for.
Is there possibly any applicability of applying any of these data sets towards prediction of greatest needs for maintenance as far as tree pruning to avoid storm effects, things like that?
Not that I know of. There's a lot of discussion now of
Well, the increasing storm
Yeah, exactly.
effects in urban areas, that's becoming more and more of a concern.
I don't think there's an answer to that yet.
How about just tracking invasive species?
Oh, there are lots of web apps for that. There's a group in Georgia, as anybody heard, EdMaps it's called. That's a really great resource. You can map your invasive plants locally. It comes out of the University of Georgia. It's like Invasive Plant Center, Invasive Plant and Ecosystem Center or something like that. If you Google them, I mean, we could probably do that now if we're like a minute away. But it's a good resource, and I think they just came out with a web app, like a phone app that you can track invasive plants on your own property or in a property you're managing or whatever.
Yeah, I think we're a little bit over time right now.
Well, I'm happy to talk
yeah.
further, and I have my cards up here.
And so if you need continuing ed credits, please sign the clipboard. Thank you, Sarah.
Sure.